Well, it doesn't lack dramatic build-up, does it? I mean, I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Lucy, you're going to be watching?
John, of course I'm going to be watching. I don't know. I have to admit, it doesn't necessarily speak to the best side of my character, but who isn't?
Yeah, don't apologise. I mean, tell me, what's the attraction? Why are you so gripped?
I'm so gripped because it is the ultimate family drama playing out in public, isn't it? And the way that everyone has fallen into these sort of typecast roles. Harry is the younger brother, wronged, nursing this grievance. The sense, at least in many parts of the British media, of Meghan is this slightly more wily manipulatrix who's sort of got her claws into Harry. I'm fascinated to hear it from them in this highly polished, quite corny, dramatic retelling of their side of the story.
Yeah, I mean, you say their side of the story with a certain edge. Are you at all receptive to the idea that they do have a side of the story? Because there are going to be very much two sides to this, aren't there?
Yeah, I am interested to hear what they've got to say, and I think there are these echoes, and I can understand why Harry saw what happened to his mother potentially playing out with his new wife as well. And the firm is this extraordinarily powerful, controlling organisation. And when they didn't want to fall in line and they wanted to do things their way, they weren't willing to be silenced when the sort of the firm fought back. So it has erupted into all-out war, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. I mean, I could perfectly well do completely without it. I mean, the soap opera, in this case, a soap opera with bells on it and more soap and bubbles on top. I know I'm going to be keeping in touch with it because that's part of what I do. But you might be picking up a certain lack of enthusiasm in the way that I'm talking about it. What about you, Paul?
John, I can't believe it. You don't like a bit of Hollywood glitz. The fact is that I think this might be better than The Crown, because The Crown, the current season, has been a bit of a disappointment, I've got to say, so far. I mean, maybe that's this familiarity with the fact that we all know the story of the modern era rather than 1950s and 60s stuff that we really liked, and enjoying new stuff. And so this is the ultra sort of reboot of The Crown, in my opinion. It's bang up to date. It's telling us new stuff we've not known before and haven't heard before. Yeah. So I think it's just a pure curiosity that will get a lot of people interested.
Yeah, I didn't watch The Crown either, but then there it is. This is going to have the effect, isn't it, of just widening out the scope of the argument and the division, because it does kind of, well, there's a lot of people, maybe me among them, in there who are not aligned, especially with this ding-dong, endless, ceaseless battle. But the battle lines are going to get closer together. More people are going to be drawn in as a consequence of that, because it's going to be such a mighty, huge media event.
Yeah, and I think that there is an argument that this does pour fuel on the fire of the culture wars.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm fascinated, John, that you're not that hooked by the story, because I find in my kind of friendship group that people who are quite mild-mannered suddenly have really strong opinions on this, and people that say they're not interested in the royals at all are gripped by this particular saga. So,
I'm kind of repelled by the culture war, if I'm honest about that. And even though there are stories here, and there's a story here which I'm going to be, immersed in as much as everybody else. I think the way that it fires people up in a way that I find personally unappealing, to put it that way. But this is it's no avoiding this, and it's going to be a phenomenon, and it's going to be in its own way maybe very, very interesting, because we're going to see the lines, as I say, getting closer together. And what's the nature of those dividing lines? I mean, there's a generational impact here, in which side people of the barricade people choose to jump onto. There's a big generational influence there.
Definitely. And what's going to be really interesting is whether or not this burns bridges and makes it impossible for them to go back in any way. Because there was, don't forget, immediately after the Queen's death, King Charles, in that very moving address, went out of his way to extend the hand of sort of, reconciliation to Harry and Meghan. And we saw them, the two brothers with their wives, obviously walking beside each other after examining all the flowers after the funeral. And it seemed as though they would kind of moved on. And what I'd love to know is whether or not this documentary was filmed before all of that or after it. I suspect it was before that. Yeah. And so they're almost locked into a contractual arrangement with Netflix to sort of deliver And that might be a bit of a shame, really, given what's happened since.
I think that's a really interesting question, Paul, as well, because there were all those reports, weren't there, after the Queen's death, that Harry was allegedly supposed to be trying to push back the publication of his book, Spare, and to remove some of the more damaging details. So one wonders if behind the scenes he was asked for this documentary to be re-edited or not.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see whether these trailers for the documentary are a proper reflection of what's going to come when we see the full final finished article. But they just look so staged in a way which I find almost baffling. I mean, they are so staged; they're very obviously staged. And do not people consuming this stuff realise, how do you have a candid shot of a young couple in a room bearing their emotions without realising there's someone in there with a camera recording it all, as if it's genuinely an authentic scene?
It's the made in Chelsea approach to the royal family, isn't it? It's really strange, which is sort of a manufactured reality.
Yeah.
And
I write it down to Americans who don't know the difference.
it may well be the case, but it'd be interesting. That's all the more reason to watch it, I've got to say. I just want to see what it's like.
All right.
I'm just going to
please,
one more
Liz.
thing.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated if Harry and Meghan themselves are furious with the producers of this documentary, who've included so much stock footage of paparazzi crowding over each other, jostling, which comes from one scene's from a Harry Potter premiere, another is to do from a scene with Trump getting out of a car.
Yeah.
That really does undermine the sense that they have been victimised by the past.
I mean, there've already been a wave of sort of explanations, so-called, for that. The idea that they're illustrative images of the paparazzi crowding around, but not crowding around them, crowding around somewhere else, someone else at an entirely different time. I mean, you'd think the thing would be a bit more sophisticated than that, because if those are the holes that we can see now on the basis of 30 seconds of promotional material, what's there going to be in the final thing? Here's me sounding like an enthusiast now, so maybe I've been dragged into this already. It's my editor's nodding her head. She thinks I've been sipping the Kool-Aid as well.